It's the early 2000s, and a chain of killings occur in South Korea. The person who carries out the murders regularly wears a raincoat when stalking and killing his victims. He usually targets rich couples and sex workers, where it's reported that he would eat their organs. This is the story of one of the most infamous serial killers in South Korean history, where we'll be diving into the events that drove Yoo Young-Chul, aka the Raincoat Killer. Yoo was born on April 18, 1970, in Seoul, South Korea. His father was a Vietnam veteran who was not able to bring in money after fighting in the war. Being that he's less fortunate than other people, Yoo is constantly bullied in school. This then develops into a huge hatred towards rich people. Now it's at this time where his father develops a gambling addiction. Once he gambles, he drinks. And when he drinks, bad things happen. Yoo is then abused for many years psychologically and physically, where his father uses a hammer to torment the young boy. When Yoo is 15, his father passes away due to a catastrophic car accident. This event then helps Yoo to slowly develop his talents. He's actually a determined and very intelligent student, as well as a skilled athlete in track and gymnastics. He's even a very good artist. He tries to enroll himself into an art school, but he fails due to him being colorblind. He then goes on to study computers, and it is at this time where things start to get a bit dark. It begins with a record. He finds it at a shopping center, however he doesn't really have the money for it, so he just decides that he'll just steal it instead. He then starts repeatedly harassing his classmates, gets caught trespassing at night, and is then sent to prison. When he's released from prison in 1991, he meets his wife, where the two soon have a baby boy together. However, over the course of a few years, he keeps going in and out of prison due to a variety of crimes. This results in him rarely being there for his family. This begins to affect his wife since she's turning into a single mom. And in the year 2000, she finally had enough. During this time, Yoo was sentenced to 3 years in prison for assaulting a teenage girl. While serving his time, his wife files for divorce, and as a result, Yoo has nothing left. This is now Yoo's breaking point. He stops talking and stops interacting with other people completely. Now while in jail, he devises a plan to seek vengeance on his ex-wife and child. Once he's released in 2003, Yoo quickly makes his way over to his wife's house, where he looks towards his baby boy. He's seeking revenge, being ready to murder his wife and son, but when he looks into his baby boy's eyes, he can't do it. He turns towards his wife, where he notices that she's drinking a beer and eating a piece of seaweed. Now Yoo is able to feel some sort of remorse. Deep down, he thinks they're suffering enough. Sadly, this still doesn't quench Yoo's bloodthirsty desires. He then makes his way to a rich neighborhood in South Korea and decides to break into the house of Mr. and Mrs. Lee. He climbs through their window and notices Mr. Lee sitting on his couch. Mr. Lee then stands up in a panic, where Yoo brutally stabs him and looks around to find his wife. Mrs. Lee then thinks that they're being robbed, so she quickly gathers all the money that she can find, and begs for her life while giving the money to Yoo. Yoo then looks her dead in the eyes and says, "Do you think I'm doing this for the money?" and smashes her to death with a hammer. This break-in then sets off the start of Yoo's killing spree on the wealthy, which advances in October of 2003, where he again breaks into another family's home. Inside, he ends the lives of a grandmother, a wife, and a son with a disability. Only days later, in October 16th, he endangered the wife of a millionaire with a knife. He then asks if anyone else is home, where she says no, so Yoo further kills her with a hammer. On November 18th, Yoo trespasses into one more house, where he encounters the family's housekeeper and asks where the master bedroom is located. He walks upstairs, opens the door, and sees a couple laying on their bed with a newborn baby between them. Yoo then takes the infant, covers its head with a blanket, and goes on to murder its parents. Now, since he doesn't want anyone to be on his trail, he then makes the scene look as if it were a robbery, where he opens a case and cuts himself. Like before, Yoo does not want to be arrested, so he burns the evidence by setting the house ablaze. Thankfully, the baby ends up being rescued, but not with a lot left. Later in December of 2003, Yoo starts dating a girl who works as an escort. Since he really loves her, he buys her gifts and goes on to propose to her. However, this is when she finds out about his criminal history. She tries to separate from the relationship, but Yoo refuses no for an answer. He then holds her captive and gets to a point where he's just about to kill her, but instead lets her free because there's just too much evidence on him. At this point in time, Yoo is so heartbroken and develops a deep hatred towards women. This forces him to target women who remind him of his ex-girlfriend. So he calls a massage place and asks for an escort to come inside his house. Once the 24-year-old woman arrives at his apartment, however, Yoo beats her unconscious with a hammer and proceeds to take her head off in his bathroom. He then repeats this heinous crime with 8 additional women, where he pretends to be a police officer who's arresting girls, forcing them to call their parents to say that they're doing okay right before killing them, with the most unsettling detail being that Yoo would eat the livers of every victim that he'd murder. 2 days after carrying out his final killing, the massage parlor becomes a bit skeptical, so the next time Yoo tries to order his next potential victim, they force Yoo to arrange a meet in public where he meets the people who run the parlor. They quickly detain Yoo, call the authorities, where he's sent off in cuffs. However, I'd like to note that Yoo is not your ordinary criminal. He's very smart and manipulative. He starts acting mentally insane in front of the police, where he's acting like he's having a seizure, and asks the police to take down his handcuffs. They remove his restraints in order to calm him down, but when one of the officers become distracted, Yoo starts running. Thankfully, he's taken back 12 hours later, because if he was never captured, it would have been likely that we would have had a mass murderer on the loose till this day. Yoo is officially taken into custody on July 15th, 2004, where he instantly admits to brutally murdering 19 people. Upon further inspection, police realize that these murders have an obvious pattern. In the beginning, Yoo murders wealthy people since he came from a very poor background. Then, he shifts his focus towards women who take part in sex work because he's had a previous girlfriend who did the exact same job leave him. Yoo was actually asked about this detail on trial, where he states, and I quote, "Women shouldn't be sluts, and the rich should know what they've done." Now, even though Yoo stated that he was sorry for what he's done, he's insistent that if he was never caught, he would have continued carrying out these gruesome murders. On December 13th, 2004, Yoo pleads guilty to 20 counts of murder and is then given the death penalty. However, South Korea hasn't actually imposed the death penalty since 1997. Due to this, Yoo Young-Chul is still, to this day, on death row.